be careful out there. Be very careful out there when you are doing anything in commerce, because everything in commerce is centered around murder capital, money, stuff that people don't like talking about. I'm just going to put a little bit of information out there and kind of bridge the gap on a few different things I said I was going to talk about and put it together in a couple of minutes, because I was speaking about the void. And I've been speaking about sovereignty in relationship to numbers and how numbers go into UCC codes. And these numbers in these UCC codes are a form of an algorithm or some form of a message for the initiated or for the initiate. And in this episode, I'm going to talk about the term briefly in relationship to ID, to ID. We're going to talk about the term Yahweh. This is supposed to be the sacred, the most sacred written way to write God or higher power. YHWH. And some people put YV or YHV I believe. No, YHWH or YWVH, excuse me, something of that nature. Sometimes the V can be swapped out for the W, because in the W you see two V's, of course. And some people pronounce it Yadhi or Vadhi instead of Yahweh. They pronounce it Yahweh, is what it is. And this term, they got this from what's called an anthropomorphic doctrine, because Yahweh is what you call a primordial being. And the problem that we're having right now with making this world flow the way it's supposed to flow, if you want to say, is because we don't realize that there are different beings here. And a lot of us are the ancestors and predecessors of what you would call primordial beings. See, Yahweh represented a primordial being or a female, and what you would call an anthropomorph or hermaphrodite, excuse me. A hermaphrodite, which is a female and a male amalgamated. To you is what it is, a female and a male amalgamated. However, when you begin to study the organs of the male and female, you'll find out that they're just introverted and extroverted versions of each other. And I'm pointing this out because the void represents the vagina. So when you say Vadhi, you're talking about the void. And I'm going to go more into this. I'm going to come back into this female and male in relationship to money, UCC codes, and in relationship to why they say that the Jews control the banks. It's because they understand these terms and they understand what they really mean. And I'm going to go into what money really is too as well. And if, I get sidetracked, somebody remind me out there that wanted to hear this information, you go ahead and remind me. But I'm going to go ahead and shut down and just say this. So the void represents the vagina. Remember we were talking about that time period that nobody can really figure out, where it's like you got a few minutes left because the day's technically out in 23 minutes and 56 minutes and some odd seconds. You have this void or this time period of like 3 minutes every day. Why 3 minutes? It's because at some point in time when these, I guess you can call them master Kabbalists or these master script writers, was writing the script for humans, they had to write the script for humans being in a state of kind of like clones. So, and the reason why they did this is because humanity has evolved so many times, but each time that humanity evolved, what they're not telling people is that it's not happening naturally. You know how some things just naturally happen, or like it's kind of like automated. Well, humanity doesn't evolve on an automated scale. Humanity evolves from what you would call a third party, or some type of what you would call divine intervention, or some type of outside source has to come in to help humanity to evolve. And I'm pointing this out because the ID is needed, in the way it's demonstrated is for the clone aspect of humans. Many of us are not clones, yet we're treated like clones because the system was created for clones, because nobody ever moved out of this experiment that I've been telling you about, except for a few people, and many of those people that moved out were set up and murdered, believe it or not. And I'm gonna go more into this experiment. It's a secret. This is what I was kind of building up to a year ago when I was talking about the XX episodes. You can check those out. But this experiment is all about ID. And the term ID, I'm gonna point these things out and then I'm gonna shut down quickly. And the term ID, if you add it up, it's a 9, which is the letter I, the 9th letter of the alphabet, and a D, which is the 4th letter of the alphabet. 9 plus 4 is 13. That's why we still on 13. And the ID represents the I. I'm not making this shit up about your value and your equity as a human being. You have equity like a house, because the ID measures your eye, your iris, or your eye, and it also measures your dent, or like a dentist, or your dental record, which ties into your ancestry, which goes into your equity. And they keep this locked in what's called your ID. It's locked in all caps. And on the ID you have what? Your name in all caps, your address in all caps, your city in all caps, your state and your zip code, very important, in all caps. The way to get out of the ID is to be able to prove those things. First you have to master the I and the D. Once you master the I and the D, you have to master 13. Once you master 13, you have to be able to prove all of those aspects of the ID without having the card to the state. In a period of time, when you do this over a period of time, they will take you out of clone status. Oh yeah, they got us in clone status and move you into a sovereign status, or which really is a primordial aspect. And this is when you get into the realm that I myself and others are into, as far as talking about sovereignty and living off the grid and being independent. So I'm gonna come back with more. I just want you to remember those things. It's about proof, and I'm gonna come back after we do the number 16. I'm gonna come back up with how you prove those aspects on your ID. The address. How can you prove an address without having an ID card? How can you do that? How can you prove your name without having some card to show them? How will someone know that's tied into some form of measuring the law know without you having this card on you? There's ways to do it. And it costs money and finance and time, and the mastery of time. And when you master time and money and finance, you'll master this aspect that I'm talking about. You'll move back into primordial status, and then that's when you can begin to look for a twin flame or soulmate and talk about marriage. To do it the right way, you have to move to primordial status, because we are separated from our other self. Remember, I said these body parts were one. So the male is the extroverted aspect of the female, and the female is the introverted aspect. And the ID and the marriage contract is designed to actually merge that back together on a spiritual level. And what the Kabbalists did, some of them that was evil, so they took the spirituality out of it. They don't want you to know about the spiritual aspect of religion and law. They only want you to be blinded. They don't want you to know that the W in Yahweh represents water. So they don't want you to know stuff like that. And what does that mean in law and commerce? What does water mean in law and commerce? All contracts are ruled by water. What is land contracts? What rules land contracts? These are things we're going to go into as we move further in relationship to spirituality. So as always, stay vigilant. Have a good day. Namaste.